All right, it is indeed time for the Fluffle to assemble once and all, and everybody, welcome to the Rabyd Atheist Show. I'm your host, Ed Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel, and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist Show, and welcome one and all to the Rabyd Nation. Whether you are a paid-for citizen, or whether you are just a tourist who's subscribed, or whether you're a person just looking across the border, wondering whether or not to immigrate to such a wonderful nation as the Rabyd Nation, welcome one and all. Welcome to the live stream. And tonight we're going to continue on and reviewing Paulogia's response to Inspired Philosophies' response to Paulogia. So we're doing Inception Part 3. And I'm continuing on this. As always, I'm just lending my scholarly support to Paul. You know, he often gets accused of he doesn't have the scholarly creds. And the unfortunate thing is I almost want to accuse Inspired Philosophy of that instead of Paul. so there you go. There you go. But welcome one and all. A few announcements before we begin. There's, of course, a goal in chat. If we reach that goal, I will wear the hat chosen by the poll. I've thrown the Holy Bunny hat in as an added bonus all week, hopefully to get some dogma that I want to add to the Fangs lore of dogma. It's some minor, administrative issues that need to be addressed with the Holy Bunny hat, but the ritual must be observed for that. There is also a link to the Fluffle of Fangs in Discord. There's also a link in my description to Earl's GoFundMe. I forgot to put it in the chat again because I'm way behind. I'm way behind. Oh my gosh, I'm a little rushed today, folks. Sorry about that. Had some things I had to take care of today. So, but yeah, there it is. There it is. Well, thank you one and all for support with Earl and all that stuff. Appreciate it. We're making progress day by day. So, as with all things, these things tend to be slower than we would like. And so, but we are doing that. All right, let's get a quick roll call before we start jumping on Michael Jones. Hopping on Michael Jones. There we go. There we go. Evan is here. Good to see Evan. I know you have a meeting later, but, make them short. I think Michael gave good advice. Dragon Rider's here. Michael is here. Martin is here. Good to see Wolf. Kelly is here. And there she is, the wonderful, lovely, smart, intelligent, beautiful, lapping which our Lord naps. IKIlledEarl. One of the smartest women I know. I think that's it. Ration, we need to I'll chat quickly. Okay. God equals the square root of -1. Welcome. God bless everyone. There you go. All right. I want to get back into this because I want to fit it. I'm going to do I'm going to try to get the chapters done today where Paul and Mike Jones going back and forth about the chapters that in the way that Paul addressed them. Remember, this is Paul's latest video reacting to Mike Jones reacting to him. And so I do have to make a correction. The actual order of this thing, like Mike Jones did not react the same day. I guess he waited a couple of days, and he did appear on Myth Vision before he did his reaction. So I want to correct that timeline, make sure everybody understands that. But that kind of makes it worse for Than, because Than in the reaction says he still hadn't watched Paul's video, and now I realize that he had plenty of time to do so. It wasn't, I could have maybe gave him the excuse that he was rushed and he didn't have time or whatever. But yeah. So there you go. But yeah. So we're gonna take a look a little bit more of this. I'm picking up with chapter 2 because Mike's reacting to Paul's reaction to chapter 2. Chapter 1, me and Paul both dismissed as kind of, sorry, Mike, this is kind of irrelevant to historical reliability. So what the genre is doesn't matter. So there you go. The torque be with you. Hey, Noise. Good to see you, Noise. All right. So, let me pull this up. And
We're talking about who wrote the Gospels. But again, he ignores the main argument we use for traditional authorship, which is that there's multiple attestation across the entire empire. And it's not the idea they're all copying one another. Actually, he gets to this in a minute. I'll correct myself.
Indeed, I did.
You have multiple attestation, and it's clear they're not just copying the same tradition because they disagree about the order the Gospels were written in. Clement of Alexandria thinks Matthew and Luke were written before Mark, but Irenaeus seems to order them Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They disagree about where the Gospels were written.
That's the live stream version. I think he expressed it more strong.
Okay. Yeah, like he's trying to reiterate his argument about the authorship. I think we already went through this. I just wanted to pick up back where the context was good. But what Mike Jones is kind of missing here, yeah, there's multiple attestation to all the different authorships of the gospel. But what Mike seems to miss is that all that attestation to, Matthew writing Matthew, Luke writing Luke, Mark writing Mark, all that stuff is at least 150 years later. Okay, so we're not dealing with eyewitnesses to the writing, talking about the writing. It's something else. Hey, Ryan. Let's see. And allegedly, Fred is allegedly here. So, yeah, it's 180 years later. Like, that's the part that Michael Jones keeps missing. And he's going to make a big mistake in this next part, by the way. So hang on to your hats on. It's good to see you, Petit. But yes, there you go.
Strongly in the pre-stream interview.
Now, here's an argument I want to make, and I've made it before. They all disagree about when the Gospels were written, order they were written in, who was present there. It's always, but they all agree on one fact. It was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Given the fact that they have different origin stories, but they still agree on that key fact, that's corroborating evidence. So they're not all just copying each other. Like, they're not all just copying Papias, for example.
Right.
They're getting it from different lines that all agree on that core fact. If a detective comes along and he comes to a murder scene and they say, well, the suspect had a knife and then he stabbed the guy, and I don't remember what he looked like, but he had a beard and a red hat. And then you come to somebody else and they go, yes, I saw him. He had a beard and a blue hat. Mm-hmm. Okay, you can probably be assured that the guy probably had a beard because you have corroborating evidence from different witnesses.
Okay, I got to stop right there. What am I ignoring now? Can you watch all of it? If you're going to do that, then do it accurately. We're supposed to be the things. Yes, we are. We're doing it. I'm doing the whole thing here. I've actually watched the response. Honestly, I listened to it at work. Michael's stuff. Yeah, I didn't think he made a lot of good points in his response, but most of it was him whining about how bad Paul's video was, and just not getting it or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. He says that a lot over and over again. But Michael Jones just made an error because his analogy doesn't work. This isn't a detective walking in and hearing two witnesses at the crime scene. Okay, this is a whole bunch of people arguing about a 150-year-old murder where they all heard different stories about who the writers were. Okay, like his analogy is completely a bad analogy, okay, because it's not that way at all. What you have is a whole bunch of church fathers arguing about stuff, and the reason there's no agreement on most of it is the fact that none of them were witnesses to who actually wrote the books. And so they're just arguing about stuff they haven't witnessed, and it's all hearsay. Like, the problem that Mike Jones doesn't seem to get is the reason the authorship question is questionable is because when the argument does finally start about who the gospel writers are, there is an argument. Okay, like the church fathers are not like in agreement on a lot of things. So there you go. What I'm just saying is that Han hadn't watched it. He hadn't watched all of it. If you're gonna ding him, yeah, well, he pretty much says, full disclosure, I haven't really watched it. So, and then he accuses Paul of not doing his homework. So I found that very ironic. Yeah, well, yeah, that's the problem. And Michael Jones doesn't see why the traditional authorship is a problem for this reason. It's not a detective walking into the room interviewing witnesses that actually saw the crime or the criminal. It's a cold case detective looking at it 150 years later, dealing with what they've heard. Like, there is no actual witnesses to the writings of the Gospels. That's the problem. And so it's a much more problematic thing. And he just doesn't want to. So there you go. Yeah, historical texts have nothing to do with actual events. Gospels being written by eyewitness when it's been known for decades, that can't be possible. Because the tradition is so strong for apostolic authorship or people that knew Jesus directly. Like, because the moment you take that away, it's somebody writing after the fact, and whether or not their stuff is correct. Like, you can't maintain evangelical fundamentalism without this. Like, it's an important point for them. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, like World War II is 100 years ago, and we still quibble about the event. Oh, he didn't write it at all? He didn't watch it at all? Oh, well, shit. Well, that's even worse, Evan. I got that wrong, but well, yeah, but that's very bad for him. Also, it just makes him a real dishonest person for him to even, like, my whole problem with that is, okay, Mike Jones, why did you invite somebody to be your co-host on a reaction when you knew the dude hadn't watched it at all? Like, why would you do that? And the thing is, he appears on Myth Vision first. Stormburner corrected me on that. Dude, what does that have to do with anything? The whole godless communist myth is just a fucking myth. And the fact that you're going to willing to put that symbol on is going to get my ban. Okay. Sorry, bro. Get a different avatar before you come on my channel. And I'm going to hide you on my channel forever. Thank you. Go away. And thank you, Earl. But yeah, like, that's sorry, that's an automatic ban. Like, get a different avatar, bro. And Aryans are a joke. And I speak as somebody who is the white man. so I just don't have time for that. Yeah, it's petite. The reason they go hard on this is that the real thing that makes it really, really difficult for them is they cannot maintain, like, the inspired word of God. The events are historical. They absolutely depend on the Gospels being historically accurate. Otherwise, there's no point. And I agree with that. Like, I think Paul, if there's Paul, the apostle does make one and say oh, he didn't watch all of it. Oh, okay. All right. Well, still a problem. You watched some of Paul's program? Okay. There you go. Thanks. Okay, let's see. All right. So, true Aryan socialist making the statement, I can't support atheism because of the USSR, with a swastika flag on his thing. How am I supposed to read that, Blossom? Like, how am I supposed to read that? I don't have time for that. So, yeah, I'm kind of surprised too, Noise. Like, how am I supposed to attribute that thing? So, yeah, thanks for the kick-ass mods. Thanks, Josh. Good to see you, Josh. But yeah, that's one. Need four more. But yeah, like, so actually what we have is, like, Than is kind of cryptic about what he believes, but that's not the issue here. The issue here is that Mike Jones knows that apologists have to keep these being written by eyewitnesses, because then they become even less historically reliable, because now you don't have authorship inside of each of the four Gospels. And you also, I mean, you also have to deal with the fact that now they're not written by eyewitnesses or even close to the time frame. So historical reliability goes down for them. They already have the problem that they don't have that stuff. So, hey, College, good to see you. Okay, there was a double negative. Okay, there you go. Thanks. Sorry, bless him. Yes, mods are better than gods. Very well. We'll do that. So, well, let's move on.
Probably, so when it comes to the gospel authors, across the Roman world, you have Irenaeus up in France, you got Papias, you got the Muratorian fragment in Rome, you got Tertullian down in North Africa, Clement over in Egypt. This tradition is spreading far and wide.
Yeah.
And they're disagreeing on things like the order, who was there, the timing, but they still think it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's good corroborating evidence.
No, it's not. If they're disagreeing on who was there, then they don't know. Okay. And they're arguing a point because there's something to argue about. Like if the authorship was so damn clear, even to them, and once again, we're talking 180 years later. Okay, like just important to make this. Okay, yeah, I get it, Evan. I get it. It's okay. I'm still going to jump on Than because he had time to watch all of it, and I don't like him saying that Paul didn't do his homework when he obviously didn't do his completely either. You said it yourself, not well evidence, but tradition. Yes. So
The detective analogy works only if the witnesses independently saw the event. Does that apply to gospel authorship? It simply doesn't follow that because there were disputes on ordering and location, that they can't have agreed on a shared tradition for the names. Mike's own source lays it out. As Mike's oft-cited Richard Bauckham admits, later references to Mark's Gospel as a record of Peter's teaching, such as those by the Muratorian canon, Irenaeus, Clement of Alexandria, Tertullian, and the so-called anti-Marcionite prologue to Mark, are probably dependent on Papias and do not provide independent testimony to a tradition more widespread than Papias' own writing.
okay, and therein lies, Paul points out the other problem, that all of them are arguing based on Papias's statements. So they don't really know. All the people arguing about it are dependent on Papias's tradition. And so what we have here is a tradition that seems to start maybe mid-second century, that it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then Papias kind of says that, Irenaeus of Lyons says it. And then all of a sudden, the 3rd century fathers are all arguing about it. The point is that it could very well be a tradition that Irenaeus and Papias started or was existent in the early church. But none of these people, I repeat, none of these people, so none of these people actually knew who wrote these people. The very fact that there's an argument about it, even among them, tells you that they didn't know. They weren't sure. They were arguing about it back then, probably because they didn't know. And so it's like, instead of saying, hey, we just don't know, but apologists can't say that. So if they say they don't know who wrote them, they got nothing. So, oh yeah, like at least I'm an authorship of the Gospels between like 70 AD and about 110 AD. So that makes more sense to me when you look at the evidence, but it's like, they did not know. These later church fathers it's all hearsay by the time it gets to them. And they've established a tradition, but that tradition, nobody tells us what that tradition is based on. And so it's just another tradition until you can prove that it's based on something else. You would have stopped there. Okay, fair enough, Earl.
Why do they have different traditions? Why are they all not just saying the same thing? Where the Gospels were written, the order the Gospels were written in.
As far as we know, none of the church fathers watched anyone write a gospel. They're not
Correct.
witnesses to authorship. They're
Correct.
repeating a naming tradition. And Mike's own favorite scholar just told you that later sources probably all drank from the same well. A rumor that travels to 5 cities is still one rumor. These questions are answered no differently if Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John really wrote the Gospels than if their names were simply added later. There was a consensus on names and not a consensus on when and where. And as you noted earlier, consensus can be wrong.
So this is the third video.
Okay, yeah, consensus can be wrong. I think Paul wrapped it up pretty well there. I'll just put my stamp on approval on what he said from a scholarly point of view. He made all the points that I would have made.
He spends less than 5 minutes on it.
As I've already mentioned, for my taste, the specific aspects of memory brought up in this chapter are relevant only after one is convinced that the authors were connected to eyewitnesses. So very cart before the horse.
He doesn't even.
Yeah, like I would say the same. Like the whole issue of memory is kind of shaky anyway. I know why Michael Jones wants to say this, because he wants to make the oral traditions that back up the Gospels more solid than they probably actually are. The real problem that he has is he hasn't, like, I've done some preliminary work study because I'm heading in a scholarly vein towards the other Gospels besides the four. And what he doesn't seem to realize is that these four Gospels are in different regions and different traditions of other Gospels surround them. And so what is remembered is disputed even among these various communities that write all these Gospels as well. So there's a whole cultural, scholastic background behind all these Gospels that Mike is completely ignoring. But if you take that seriously, then somebody is really, yeah, like it is precept language too. Valid point. But it's like, there's a whole bunch of other Gospels that are remembering things differently than the four Gospels do. Okay. Like there's other sets of memories. There's different teachings. Like none of these Gospels just pop out of the blue. They're part of traditions that surround them. Like you have, Matthew and Mark are more like Judean tradition Gospels. And there's some Gospels besides Matthew and Mark that are also attached to that area of the world. You have Asia Minor, you've got in Asia Minor, you got John, the Gospel of John is there, but there's also a whole bunch of other Gospels that didn't make the canon that remember things differently at the same time that the Gospel of John is written and being circulated. So this idea of memory, to me, gets blown apart because we have actually other Gospels that share the memory of what happened with Jesus differently, even in the time that they're being written. So it's like there's just so much different memories that everybody is just like, yeah, don't forget about the tiny sheets of paper. Yeah, but so it's like what the apologists are doing, they want to focus on Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but they forget there's a whole cultural, Christian, literary context that the four Gospels are in. And that context has different memories about what happened with Jesus. Like there's different stories. There's different ways the teachings are presented. The character of Judas, for instance, in the four canonical Gospels is portrayed badly, but there's at least one Gospel that portrays Judas in a positive light. Like, so it's like, the point is the early Christians were remembering different stories and they were remembering them differently. And there's variations, okay, of those memories. So this whole argument in chapter 3 of memory, just to me, is just nonsensical. Like, so what, Yeah. Well, it's not just a telephone game, Blossom. It's like 55 telephone games are being played all at the same time. Like this chapter on memory, he's like trying, all these gospel writers had a solid memory. Well, if I can make that argument for the four, then I can make it for the other 40 too. And so it fails to me. The memory argument has always failed to me for that very reason. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff around us. So
Hit my main points in this video here. I think for the most part, we're just going to, what?
I just didn't know which one it is. So
Is memory unreliable?
yeah, memory.
The early Christians were subject to every cognitive bias and memory failure that modern psychology has documented. Ian Hunter surveyed studies of oral cultures across multiple continents, Slavic epic poetry, oral African history, even Icelandic sagas, and found no examples of what he defined as lengthy verbatim recall, meaning word-for-word correspondence of 50 or more words. He concludes that literate people—
I didn't even argue for that. I argued gist.
and I argued against gist, which you didn't play. The Lord's Prayer appears in different forms in Matthew, Luke.
I like that one. That was very quick. You argued gist and I argued against gist. So there we go.
and the Didache, the words of institution at the Last Supper, vary across Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Paul's first letter to Corinthians. These are among the most liturgically central texts in early Christians had. If anything was going to get memorized precisely, it was those. And yet, they weren't.
But I didn't argue for that. My goodness. And there's 2 videos basically on.
Yeah, I know what you argued for. You argued for they got the gist right. Well, what the hell is that if not subjective? Like gist? Hey, Hyper. Yes, whisper down the lanes. Yes. It's more like you said the same thing to 12 different people and then told them to tell other people. That's kind of the way the gospel. Yeah, gist. Like what Michael Jones argues for in his video is that they got the gist of it right. How vague is that? Like, how subjective is that? And you want to hang your hat on gospel authorship on gist? And Paul just argued against it in his own video. He just argued against it.
Well, could they have had accurate memories when they were written down? Nowhere do I argue that has to be word for word. In fact, I'm pretty sure I argue against that.
It's a little funny that it's in the section on memory where you forget what you said and what I'm responding to.
Their training in verbatim memorization in a text-supported environment gave them tools for exact or semi-exact repetition that allowed them to produce works that featured remarkably precise parallels.
Go check the video for full context. But yeah, verbatim memory is discussed, which is
Yes, Michael Jones does make the case for verbatim memory. Maybe not necessarily the statement word for word is used, but I've listened to that chapter twice, and he does make the case that they could have. Yeah, well, it was a great burn. Well, it's like, but he does make the case. Michael Jones doesn't seem to be able to remember what he said in his own damn video at this point, and it's absolutely funny that it's on the chapter on memory. It's hilarious.
why I was talking about it. The temporal gap and the cultural disanalogies alone are disqualifying. But Theodore Whedon went ahead and compared Bailey's own story examples against a 9.
Okay, by the way, we just switched to oral tradition as proof. Like he's trying to prove oral tradition's a good thing. Yeah, they decided on the final version of the story at Nicaea and subsequent conclaves. And yeah, like it's the thing the apologists don't want to address, Fred, is very simple, that the 4 gospels aren't the only ones. Okay. They have to argue a lot of things. Number one, they have to argue why they picked these 4 gospels. And then they still have to argue the historical reliability of them. The problem is most apologists do not want to acknowledge that there's a whole basket full of gospels that they could have picked from. And they absolutely had an influence on each other. And nobody wants to talk about it. Tiny sheets of paper vibes, yes. Here. I'll put it up real quick and then get back to the video. There you go. Tiny sheets of paper. But yeah, so now I switched to oral tradition, and he's going to, Mike tries to prove that, and Paul has a response to it, of course. And now we're responding to Mike's response to, it's the inception thing. Here we go.
14 written accounts of the same tales and found substantial differences, meaning Bailey's data didn't demonstrate preservation at all. And this whole enterprise conflates stability across retellings with evidence for historical authenticity, that the events described happened. But Bailey's own primary examples demonstrate stable retellings of fabrications, like the tale.
So the problem is this has been addressed by James D.G. Dunn. And I had thought about including this in the original video, but I thought it was getting a little bit too... it was going to get too much into the weeds here.
My bad for addressing the scholar you presented instead of the one you thought about including.
But I mean, like, if you go through this paper, he just points out, we're not going to use Bailey's data set, but that doesn't mean his model is unuseful. And this is why James D.G. Dunn is still using it and defending it.
He shouldn't still use and defend it after the alleged data behind it collapsed. Dunn just...
Yes, like apparently Michael Jones isn't aware that the data collapsed, and so the whole theory kind of fell apart. So yeah, oral tradition is once again much more questionable because there are oral traditions that are oral traditions of fabrications of known falsities. So you can still use oral tradition, and oral tradition can be accurate, but it also can be accurate about something that didn't happen or has a complete false vein to it. So it doesn't help your case for the Gospels anymore. Like the whole oral tradition argument to me has just collapsed, because all it really proves is maybe you can have an accurate oral tradition, but as Bren said, it's limited in what it can do. Okay, it is very limited in what it can do, and it has its problems. Like you can have this. So it was brutal. It's brutal. Because Michael Jones, his problem is he's trying to play at being a biblical scholar. And I'm sorry, Paul's more of a biblical scholar than he is. And Michael Jones is in over his head because he hasn't bothered to educate himself properly. He's too busy being an apologist. And so he's got to produce content, and it's just become bad. Like you can have an oral tradition that he's arguing for here, and that oral tradition can be a tradition of something that was a lie. Like, so it does, just because you preserve something through oral tradition doesn't mean it's accurate. Okay, so yeah. Paul can cut the throat of misdirection, missing much respect for Paul, almost none in Jones. Yeah, Jones just doesn't have this ability to understand what the problem is. Like it's just bad. It's just bad. So I know that Mike Jones didn't add that study. Well, because I'm going to tell you, it doesn't help his case. If he had included it, Paul would have pounced on it as saying, yes, except you shouldn't be including this because there's other studies that have been written that disprove this guy's original point altogether. Okay, so if he had included it, it would have been just another point for Paul to pounce on, just like he just did. Like he would have done the same thing right in the video instead. So, yeah, you don't have any respect for him. There you go. That's fair. See you later, Evan. Have a good one. May your meeting be quick and productive. It's the blessing of Fangs upon you, sir. Krishna, but a way to conform to anything. Yeah. He is a LARPing as a scholar. Yeah, he really is. He needs to, if he wants to speak in biblical scholarly terms, like he needs to go get a master's degree in biblical studies or something where he's actually exposed to actual biblical study work, and then he would be better. But he doesn't want to do that because he's got nothing else. So, and help and thanks. Appreciate it. Yes, hit the like button. Do all the things. I appreciate it. I do.
Shifted the goalposts to a rhetorically weaker model of an informally controlled tradition, one without evidential backing. Instead of preserving events, Dunn says the traditions preserve the impacts Jesus made on people, some warm impression passed down through generation of retelling. Not exactly a foundation of reliability. Scholars aren't impressed. Alan Kirk and Eric Eve separately came to the conclusion that Dunn is ignoring how memory changes with each access. This whole model was supposed to protect the reliability of eyewitness testimony, but Richard Bauckham and Samuel Burskog, scholars used by Mike in this series, point out that Dunn can't actually explain what the eyewitnesses are doing inside his own system. Control gets handed down to the community as a whole, not to the people who are actually there. Burskog asks Dunn directly how an eyewitness's authority is even supposed to show up in a model built around anonymous corporate remembering, and Dunn's answer was to retreat to eyewitnesses being just the spark that lit the fire before the community took over. Sounds like minimal witnesses. So a theory built to rescue the eyewitness.
Yeah, like what we now know about the oral traditions and stuff is that actually fits with Paulogia's idea of minimal witnesses better. Like you have these witnesses like maybe Paul and Peter being the initial spark of the traditions, and then the community takes control of the traditions and does with it what they want to. That absolutely fits Paul's theory. Like it absolutely fits his hypothesis of how the early church could have come about. And to be honest, I've said it before, I'll say it again, that Paulogia's minimal witness hypothesis is a damn good one. And the more we learn, the more it starts to get backed up. But basically what ultimately the oral tradition people had to do is they had to retreat to this basic point of you can have eyewitnesses be the initial spark of the traditions, but then the community takes control of those traditions and they can become anything the community wants them to be. That's not helpful. Okay, it's just not helpful. So as he refuses to think past his ability to fully. Yeah, like I would agree with that. Like he's got a philosophy degree, but I wonder what he actually learned from it. So yeah. But this oral tradition thing has fallen apart, and it fell apart a long time ago.
Witnesses ends up writing them out of the story.
We're about to get to one of my favorite lines in the video, the whole video, that is.
Mark does gesture toward Paul's appearance list. The young man at the tomb tells the women to go tell Peter specifically that Jesus will meet him in Galilee. Tabor's read is that Mark knows no details of that appearance beyond the few words that Paul provides in 1 Corinthians 15, where Jesus appears first to Cephas. So Mark points at it without narrating it. Everything Mark knows, he gets from Paul. Then
everything Mark knows, he gets from Paul. What?
So wasn't he just arguing?
Why is it your favorite line? Okay, I'm going to let this play because this is hilarious.
That Paul is like too thin for the gospel. Like he literally just said, well, why didn't they use Paul? Because they're not interested in reconciling and stuff like that, right? So there's something about Paul that's not good enough for Mark to use, but now Paul's thick enough for Mark to use.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, like, again, I don't want to hear these guys call themselves skeptics anymore because they will be so skeptical of what Christians believe, but then they'll believe things that there's just no evidence for. What do you mean everything Mark knows he got from Paul? How do you know that? If you use your own skepticism on your own theory, you would reject it immediately.
once again, we're going to need to go back further into my video to get the context for what I'm saying.
Now, some may try to
Imagine that Michael Jones and Than took Paul out of context. Imagine that.
argue that later Christians borrowed from Paul's letters to construct the Gospels, and that is why we find similar teachings in them. But once again, if that is what occurred, why did the Gospel authors not invent stories based on the appearances Paul lists in 1 Corinthians 15?
So Mike asks specifically about post-resurrection appearances in the Gospels and their connection to post-resurrection appearances in 1 Corinthians. Got it? The topic at hand is post-resurrection appearances. So why didn't the Gospels just copy Paul's appearance list from 1 Corinthians 15? Probably because they weren't trying to harmonize facts. They were making arguments to address the specific theological disputes of their own communities. Mark has no post-resurrection appearances at all, ending with the women fleeing in silence. Mark does gesture toward Paul's appearance list. The young man at the tomb tells the women to go tell Peter specifically that Jesus will meet him in Galilee. Tabor's read is that Mark knows no details of that appearance beyond the few words that Paul provides in 1 Corinthians 15, where Jesus appears first to Cephas. So Mark points at it without narrating it. Everything Mark knows, he gets from Paul. To be clear, everything Matthew knows about post-resurrection appearances, Mark gets from Paul. If you
Okay. So what Michael Jones did is he only played a clip of it and he took it out of context. Because if the whole context of that entire statement, and I went back and watched, Paul's video again, the whole context was about post-resurrection experiences. Okay, that's all it was. There's other times, yes, that Mark seems to avoid using Paul for other facts, but it's not about staying in a lane. It's just pointing out the fact that there's inconsistencies here. But Paul was talking purely in the context, Paulogia was, and purely in the context of post-resurrection appearances. And Mike and Than made it something bigger than that. And they took him out of context. So it's hilarious. He's got a major in Fluffle. Okay. Okay, there we go. Fair enough.
follow James Taylor's logic, the scholar whose reading I was walking through. The sentence is in that context. Given Taylor's interpretation, Paul's passage in 1 Corinthians does contain all of the post-resurrection appearance information needed by the author of Mark, which is admittedly almost none. This is undeniably correct. If you want to take that in isolation and pretend that I think that Mark's full 16 chapters of Jesus' biography is pulled from the letters of Paul, when I've spent a decade saying the opposite, including in this very video, as Dan points out. Or, if you want to pretend that I've made a positive case that this is what happened, rather than simply quoting a scholar and putting his possibility on the table, then so be it.
Yeah, because Paul wasn't even saying he agreed with this thing. He's just saying this is what this one guy pulls out as a possibility. Like, skeptics are going to come at this from different angles, Mike and Than. They're going to show that there's different flaws in your arguments from different things, and they have different opinions about what the legitimate criticism is. Like you just dismissing their, well, I don't want to hear these people call themselves skeptics again because they can't make up their mind. Well, you straw man the flipping issue. This isn't about somebody saying, one person may say that he didn't rely on Mark, and another person says he did rely on Mark for just post-resurrection appearances, or they didn't at all. Like the point is that Jones just doesn't seem to get is that skeptics have differences of opinion about what should be addressed. And like, he's not going to allow for that. All these skeptics have to be consistent on every single skepticism, or they need to stop calling them skeptics. Come on, man. That's garbage. Okay. You have different criticisms about Paulogia than other apologists have about Paulogia. Does that mean you should all shut up until you get consistent about your criticisms? Come on, man. Come on. Oh, because he's in trouble. Bren, I think Mike Jones is in trouble. I really do. I think he's got his blind followers, of course, but I think he's losing credibility, okay, with a lot of people, including some Christians that do like scholarly channels. Like, so yeah. Yeah. That's what kills you about it. So yes. You know what I mean? But yeah, like this is the problem. Like, okay, well, fine. I want all apologists to start being consistent in their criticism of various counter-apologetics or critics or atheists. Start being consistent in that, Jones, and then we'll call for all skeptics to be consistent. So there we go.
I don't even think Bart Ehrman goes so far as to say everything Mark knows he gets from Paul, because he clearly.
Yes, that's the point. Like Bart Ehrman doesn't say that, but this other guy Paul was referencing does. It doesn't mean that Paulogia himself agreed with him. He's just pointing out that the guy that you cited in your original video has a difference of opinion with you. Oh my God. Dude, IKIlledEarl, they're straight avoid. Yeah, they won't do it. Like they know that they can't.
He doesn't. I mean, it's just like, wow.
Wow. That claim I didn't make sure is silly, right? To be clear, the observation is that Mark reveals nothing about post-resurrection appearances that Paul's letters hadn't already revealed, which is interesting, at least to me. But this actual point will not be addressed, possibly because ridiculing a specific individual line was clearly pre-planned and highly anticipated.
We're about to get to one of my favorite lines in the.
Yeah, this whole part, I think I listened to this part live for sure a couple of times when I listened to Jones's response. This is a setup. Like they wanted to set this up, and this was pre-planned, and they deliberately did not quote Paul in context. And yeah, I'm calling Michael Jones out on that as being that's a deliberate propaganda hit piece move there, where they cherry picked what Paul said and didn't put him in context, that he was talking about one particular quote that he didn't necessarily agree with himself, but was just pointing out a criticism of Michael Jones's own position. Yeah, this was a setup. They anticipated this. They built this up. It was bullshit. So yeah, he doesn't really. That's kind of the point me and Paulogia are making. He doesn't really rebut anything because he doesn't know. Oh, you misread the smart. I'm not bad. Should laugh about that too. Yeah, like he primed a gotcha and it didn't work. Like, because all Paul had to do is say, oh, thanks for putting words in my mouth, because I'm not saying that, this other scholar is. And I was talking about a particular issue, not the whole thing. Like Michael Jones completely misrepresented Paul here, and I'm calling him out on it. Like, that was just bad.
The whole video, that is.
Funny. You boys have a nice time?
Yeah, it was great.
I'm glad you had fun.
Yeah. So now we're moving on to part 6 of the video. I argued why the Gospels are early. I refute the idea, the claim that, Jesus predicted the temple, therefore it has to be written after 70 AD. Paul agrees. Good on him.
Good on me.
Mentioning the importance of the temple tax after 70 AD would have been problematic, as it would have been going to a pagan temple.
After 70 CE, every Jew, including Jewish Christians, had to pay that specific tax to fund a pagan cult. Matthew's story of Jesus and Peter choosing to pay the tax voluntarily, even though they're technically exempt as children of the king, is directly applicable pastoral advice for a community deciding whether to pay an offensive Roman tribute.
But that's not what this.
Okay, yeah, like the dating of the Gospels, like, first of all, there's a lot of other reasons to date the Gospels later, and it doesn't have a damn thing to do with the prediction of the temple. Like, that is something you can bring up, but I don't. There's other things internally that point to that. I actually think it's weak evidence. It's not non-evidence that they were written later, but there's other things in all the Gospels that kind of indicate they were written after the destruction of the temple, but after other things as well. He's got you. Yes, they always miss, yeah. A pound of crap and a pound of gold, they're the same weight. Yes, yeah, it's good on Paul for pointing this out. Like, I think I remarked about that at one point, that this is not the temple thing is not a thing that I would hang my hat on.
Story's about. That's the story about render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. That wouldn't be the point of this story.
No, we're both talking about the doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax story in Matthew 17.
The point of this story is about the temple tax, not a pagan temple tax. Like, that has nothing to do with the story. Why would you import context that's not about this? Like,
you said mentioning the temple tax after 70 AD would have been problematic. I provided a reason why the author might have done so. The pre-70 Jewish temple tax was called the didrachm. The post-70 tax to Jupiter's temple was set at the same didrachm amount. So it's very plausible that someone paying this post-70 tax might write a story where Jesus affirms that they should be exempt from the tax from the false kings, but pragmatically pay it anyway so you don't offend anyone. A later narrator is no longer problematic under this perspective.
Yeah, the whole point that Paul is making is that either way, like, if it's written before the temple destruction or after the destruction, the whole story of Peter getting the temple tax out of the fish's mouth, I don't know if it was a bass or trout or whatever the hell it was, works either way. Like, it doesn't prove anything either way to me. Like, to me, it's like, okay, if they wrote it before 70 AD, it's dealing with the actual temple tax to the Jewish authorities. If it's written after, it's dealing with the pagan temple tax, because there was a temple tax in both things. It doesn't really matter. So yes, like, it's just, it's like, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it is a weird point of evidence because it doesn't really help either side. Like, and that's not why people believe the Gospels are written later. It's not about the temple tax. It's not about the temple predictions. There's other things in the story in the Gospels that kind of indicate that, like, Mark was written either right as Jerusalem is being sieged or a little bit after. There's a lot of good evidence for that doesn't have anything to do with any of this.
Direct parallel, the Mishnah, compiled around 200 CE, presents laws governing temple sacrifices and priestly duties in the present tense, as though the temple were still standing. But the temple had been gone for over a century by then.
Yeah, like Mike Jones makes a couple of points. Like, it wouldn't make sense for the Gospels to write this stuff if the temple wasn't still standing. But it's like, the Jews, other people, even Old Testament writers write about temple procedures and stuff, either to A, make theological points, or B, with this prophetic hope that the temple is going to be restored. So it's like, for Jones to make the point, like, it wouldn't make sense for the gospel writers to write about the temple if the temple wasn't already there. Like, no, it's part of the set dressing for the story, and people are going to write about it before and after the temple exists. So it's just what it is. So yeah, sure, fangirling a bit. Yeah, he is grasping at straws. Like, this part of the dating of the Gospels, conservatives have to grasp at a lot of straws, because there's other evidence. Like, they tend to focus on some of the weaker evidence that critics produce because it's easier, but there's other stronger, deeper textual stuff. So that Jones doesn't even get into.
Brewer notes that Jews continue to study temple law, debate proper temple piety, and transmit it as living Torah because they expected the temple to be rebuilt. Matthew's doing exactly what the other Jewish authors did.
All right, hold on one second. I'm going to pull up paper. Again, this was something I thought about going more into when I was making this video. But Charles Quarles wrote a whole paper on this. Yeah, there's a stuff, and he uses the Mishnah. The point he says is that the Mishnah sayings actually represent pre-70 AD traditions that wound up in the Mishnah.
Once again, I wouldn't be able to respond to scholarship not presented, but
Correct.
This one was new to me and sounded genuinely interesting, so I downloaded the free copy and read it.
He actually makes the case that no,
Uh-oh.
they were not doing that kind of stuff. The stuff that shows up in the Mishnah represents pre-70 AD traditions. And he does this by evaluating a lot of the things with regarding those sayings. So this actually works against Paul.
I think Mike misinterprets what my analogy is meant to show. Charles Quarles, which is fun to say, argues that the oath traditions in the Mishnah go back to before 70 AD. But that timing is not in dispute and was never the point. Of course, those traditions predate the temple's destruction. Otherwise, they wouldn't matter here. The relevant fact is that later Jews kept preserving, teaching, and discussing temple material long after the temple itself was gone. Quarles does.
In other words, it's perfectly legit for later gospel writers who write after 70 AD to still reference temple ideas because it's part of the setting, it's part of the dressing, it's part of where the events were supposedly taking place. Like and for Michael Jones to say, well, they wouldn't have done that because the temple has been destroyed. That's just not the case. So yeah, it's probably more. And I think that the reason he leaves it out, Dragon Rider, is like he knows that Paul will go look at it and other people will go look at it and realize it doesn't make his case. I think Michael Jones is starting to become painfully aware that he needs to like read his entire sources before he presents them because he's been Trojan sourced a lot. Like he's been where he's cited a source and then that very source makes a point against him. So it's like I think he's hopefully he's beginning to realize this, but it is Mike Jones, so we'll see. So, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you write, like, what Jones is basically saying, why would you write about the temple if it's destroyed? It's like, because it's part of the story, like, why wouldn't you? Like, it's really weird evidence for him to cite for early gospel authorship because I can write a story that, sets a historical location that no longer exists, back in time. And why, it's like arguing, why would you do that? Because it's destroyed. Like, no, that just doesn't work. So he's to go to cherry picking. Okay, there we go. But yeah, it is the second time that he's left something out. So I wanted to include that in the original. Well, dude, here's the thing. If you're going to write something, if you're going to create something that proves the historical reliability of the Gospels, you need to include everything as much as possible. Sorry, because you need to build your case and you also need to present some of the opposing cases and say why they're wrong. And you need to like highlight your main points and you need to be briefer so people will actually look at it.
But actually disagree with that. His claim is narrower. He suggests that one specific kind of oath may have dropped out of common use over time. That is a reasonable possibility worth considering, though it rests on thin evidence, and Quarles himself treats it only as offering some support for an early date, rather than proving one. The survival of a pre-70 temple controversy tells us much more about the world Jesus operated in than about how it was when Matthew sat down to write his gospel. Nevertheless, an interesting paper I didn't know about before.
So, in other words, Paul downloaded the paper, read the paper, and said, well, these are some interesting points, but I don't think it proves anybody's point. It certainly doesn't prove Michael's point, and it doesn't prove anybody else's point. So it's like, okay, fine, great. For the big blow, you're out of your element, Donnie. Yes. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. Oh, my goodness. Yes. Yeah. Not innuendo. There we go. Yeah. Like, all right. We're going to talk about Greek.
Let's move on to the next video here. Paul, this was part 7 of the series, Did Jesus Speak Greek? Paul didn't really address a lot of this, if at all. So I didn't really write anything down.
Maybe my feelings should be hurt, but if he didn't write anything down, then I don't have to address anything.
The point of this video was to show that Jesus, many of the words that Jesus spoke were probably spoken in Greek.
What do you mean?
No, the hell to the no. I'm sorry, that part, my video is going to be really short on that part, I think. If that's your main point, Mike, like, no, he spoke Aramaic. Like, scholars pretty much, if he spoke Greek, it's possible that he knew multiple languages. I'm not saying it's not. He would have only spoken it to people that didn't understand Aramaic. Like, his native language is Aramaic. Like, it's, and I could be a ball washer if he worked at a ball again. No small notes, yes. But yeah, like, it's, yeah, like, how does he know that? Like, we know that the most likely language is Aramaic because we know that a lot of shit is from that time period is written in Aramaic. We know from other testimony that people in Palestine, the Jews, mostly spoke Aramaic. Like, being trilingual back then was probably common from a speaking point of view because you had to deal with different people. But the idea that Jesus spoke Greek and didn't speak his native tongue is just really, really, it's a tiny sheet of paper. Oh my gosh. Yeah, like, it didn't matter either because Jesus, whether he speaks in Greek or Aramaic is irrelevant. Like, and that's another, it doesn't do anything for historical reliability is my point. Like, other than, the New Testament gospel authors wrote in Greek. And that explains it because Jesus spoke in Greek. No, that's not the way they did it. It's not the way they did it. Oh, Don, cheers. Hey, Ron. When Jesus does return, he comes back as a trans female just to get the grace. Yeah, I hope so too. When Mike Jones said that, my whole point was to just prove that Jesus spoke Greek. I'm like, what?
Probably. If you mean mathematically, yes, the probability is not zero.
I'm just going to move ahead to the part Than is mainly here for, which is the onomastic congruence section.
Oh, that's why Than's here.
Which
yeah, because I was beginning to, like, given that he said, yeah, it's not zero that Jesus spoke Greek. The probability that Jesus spoke Greek is not zero. I'll grant that one, but it's not likely. But yes, but this is why Than is here, because he's got to do his Bayesian mathematic bullshit and talk about how the names of the Gospels are related to what actually was in the time period. I'll tell you what, though, I am going to take an intermission for 2 minutes, and we're going to come back to this very point because I appreciate build up, and my problem with Than is, more than Michael Jones, Than needs to, like, step away and go get some learning. So but I'm gonna play IKE's intermission and take a 2-minute break, and I'll be right back to finish this up. So I'll be back in a couple. All right, and I am back. All right, all right, just to set the stage. Chapter 8 is all about names and why the Gospels are historically reliable because the names fit the time period. And this is why Than has even been brought into the street, which I found Paul's statement particularly ironic. Oh, this is why Than is here. Because we were all wondering up to this point, seeing he admitted he only watched some of the video and not all of it, and probably a small part based on what he says. So why is Than here? Okay, so this is his part. So let's see what happens because it's hilarious.
A little bit sucks because there's only so much I can say. So I'll just get this out of the way right now. Luke Van de Wey, Jason Wilson, and I, we actually have a paper that we did a bunch of stuff that responds to everything Paul's about to say. And now that paper has turned into a peer-reviewed book that's going to be coming out. So there's only so much I can say about all the stuff we'll cover, but I'll say what I can.
That's relatable, understandable, and acceptable, given what I said in my section of the video. While Gregor and Blaze have not yet published a formal response to Van de Wey and Wilson, peer-reviewed work takes time and they are busy people with many projects on the go. I have had the privilege to preview some of their observations and continuing work. Sadly, I'm not yet allowed to share the most interesting development until their work is published, hopefully by fall. So you can't talk about it, and I can't talk about it. Maybe we should all just meet back here in a year, once everything's published, and see who wins. And in the meantime, we'll all agree to take 12 months off of claiming that naming frequencies are an argument for or against the Gospels. Everyone.
Okay. So just to set everybody straight here, and Mistress, welcome, Mistress, but a valid point from you. Yeah, because, Paul are common names today, too. We're going to talk about naming frequency and conventions later. We're all agreed to take 12 months off until everybody's paper gets to. So this is why Than is here. And then his answer is a non-answer. Sorry, you're going to have to wait. So that's chapter 8. So there you go. Yeah, I don't think they were see, the problem with both sides of this, Dragon Riders, are both going at it with this whole topic. Now I'm going to tell you what I think. I don't think it matters, because if you look at names indicating something is historically reliable, I don't think that that's used very often in other history. And the fact that the apologists are reaching for what I would consider to be a lesser historical technique that doesn't really prove much and can kind of give you a breath. But here, even if the Christian side of things, they're going to have to acknowledge that the range includes going into the 2nd century, because those same names that are used in the 1st century are also used in the 2nd. It doesn't help you. All you need for the gospel writers to have is a working knowledge of what names were common. And some of the naming in the Gospels is really weird because there's 6 Marys and there's not a lot of originality. And I would argue that the sample size is too small, but and it doesn't prove the Gospels are historically reliable. It just proves that whoever wrote them was acquainted with what the common names of the time were. That's all it's going to prove. So it's so we're going to put a pin on it and wait. We'll wait 12 months and not say either way what it does.
Put a pin in this one.
We agreed to put a pin in it, all right? What agreement? Was no pin. I don't trust this French whore.
Anyway, let's moving on to the next one, which is this video is Mark and Eyewitness account. Which one is this in the series? This is video 9 of the series that Paul is going to try to address.
In this section, Mike is arguing that Mark is leaving off people's names because he doesn't want them to get in trouble, which is therefore evidence that the book is written very early. And I replied, there are innumerable reasons that characters in the text could be unnamed. So it's impossible to draw a firm dating conclusion based on one of many plausible interpretations.
No one's denying there's other ways to explain it, but we're just saying it's part of a cumulative case.
The trouble with a cumulative case is that you eventually have to accumulate something. 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 0.
It makes more.
Thank you, Paul, for saying it. I do that Michael Jones would eventually respond to his series where he's going to talk about this whole series is about a cumulative case. But the problem is, and I will echo Paul's words, so far you got 0 from chapter 1. From my perspective, 0 from chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're acknowledging that there's a 0 from 8 because we're not going to talk about it. So if it's a cumulative case, how do you stack up anything if there's nothing to stack up? So I hate apologists with this cumulative case crap, because it's like, no, you actually have to produce something to accumulate, and so far nothing. And the gospel historical reliability, so far nothing. Like in this whole series up to this point, I've listened to it twice now. I'm getting ready to start listening to it a third time, and both times I'm like, I'm waiting for something that can't be completely disputed and brought down to 0, and so far nothing. So it's like, Mike, go back to school. Go back to school.
More sense as an eyewitness report.
You heard it here first. We expect witnesses to leave off names and the non-witnesses to use names. That's
complete and utter excusegetics. Fred, that's just complete excuses. Like, why would we assume that? Why would we assume that actual eyewitnesses would leave off names, but with actual non-witnesses would put names in? Like, why is that an assumption? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. Sometimes eyewitnesses put names in and sometimes they don't. That's a better observation. And so for Mike Jones to sit there and say, oh, because he doesn't use people's names, that proves that it's an eyewitness. Like, what? Like, huh? So, yes. Oh my goodness. But yeah, like I don't understand this argument. I just don't. Like, I don't see how he thinks that this has any weight. Like, hey, how you doing, man? Hey, Eric, how you doing? But yeah, like, I don't understand this. Like, why would that be a thing? Like, how is that a thing? Can you prove that eyewitnesses leave out names and people who aren't witnesses put them in? Like, that's just a weird thing to prove anything.
what you'd expect, apparently.
I also want to point out a lot of what I'm doing in the videos, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John eyewitness account. I totally agree. Internal evidence is not enough to establish the truth of traditional authorship.
We agree. Internal evidence is not enough to establish traditional authorship.
Correct. Almost everybody agrees on that, except for a few other people.
Which is the point of my response, right? That all these things are insufficient to establish reliability, particularly for someone who isn't assuming reliability to start with.
It's meant to support the external data, which we've already defended at length now.
External data? You mean the people who agree after 180 because you don't have anyone connecting a name to words we can identify from these Gospels before that? Papias.
Yeah, like once again, we come back to this 180 year, 150 year gap if you take in they were written early. Like, and even the early scholars would probably say it's still like 135. Like, it's still yeah, hit like, I always appreciate that, Eric. We're all written by people who claim to be eyewitnesses. This would increase the resurrection. Dead men don't come back. Yes. And that's kind of the thing. Like, I don't, like, he keeps leaving out the fact that there's a gap of time between when he says the writing takes place and people actually talk about who's writing it. And it's a significant time gap. It's over a century long. Like, so the people that start arguing about the traditional authorship as part of the tradition, they're dealing with hearsay. None of these people back then, once again, same thing. So atheist actually means, God exists, but morals, you believe are rocks. No, God didn't say have slaves. He did. Oh, must be a good. Mistress, you're hitting the nail on the head. Like, they always have an excuse. Like, I think it was Mr. Deity that nicknamed them the excusagists, and it's definitely sticking. Fred uses it a lot, but yeah, it's just So, like, yeah, but like, there's 100-year plus gap between your writing of these gospels and they start to argue about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Like, come on, man.
Dropped names with no quotes we can check, just in quotes at length, but with no names.
We're now onto the video of Matthew's reliability. Now, you and I agree, Than, that of the 4 gospels, Matthew's probably the hardest to argue for.
For traditional authorship, or for what specifically?
Traditional authorship, I'd say.
Yeah,
Yeah. We don't think that means it's bad. We just say of the 4, there's better points to be made for Mark, Luke, and John than Matthew. But still, we'll acknowledge that.
I respect that. Third, and this should end the argument, Matthew copies his own conversion story from Mark. It's the first day he personally met his Savior Jesus, and he lifts it word for word from someone who wasn't there, changing only the name Levi to Matthew. Nope. The big problem is using the words of someone who wasn't there to describe the day you met God incarnate. But those so-called details and accuracy.
Yeah, like, I'm sorry, this is a big point for me. Like, when I was still a believer, this was very, very puzzling to me. Why Matthew is supposedly the writer of Matthew, but when he talks about his own starting to follow Jesus, he literally, well, I don't know how much of it might be a few words different, but he just copies Mark's account. Like, he doesn't give his own. And I just found that incredibly weird. And I know there's a lot of apologists that try to defend this, but their defenses always fall flat to me. Like, it's always fallen flat to me. So yes. Yeah, there's a floor for you, Kim. I used to debate on Talk when the gotcha was called Roadrunner fallacy incorrectly. Okay.
Aren't the kind that require the author to be an eyewitness, just someone who understands Jewish culture better. As a typical example, in Mark, Jesus tells the disciples to pray that their apocalyptic flight not be in winter. Matthew adds, nor on a Sabbath, a natural concern for Torah-observant Jews.
No one is saying this. I say in the video, Paul, this doesn't prove eyewitness testimony.
About that, you are correct.
I'm saying these are consistent facts with what the external evidence shows us.
Again, by this, you mean the 100 years of no one quoting the Gospels with those names, and a few examples of someone quoting them differently, but then at some point after 180, everyone agreed? If that's the important part, and the rest...
Hey, Kurt. Yeah, I mean, I know it is. I'm just adding more fuel to the fire. I don't know. As an anti-theist, sometimes I just get into this mode of, you know what? Let's go make an apologist's life difficult. And that's what I'm doing, Mike. So, but like, that has been addressed. That doesn't really make sense because you have good, to me, there's good evidence like Matthew and Luke correct Mark's mistakes, but you don't see Mark changing Matthew or Luke. So I think most scholars, well, I hate using that term, but like, I know that for myself, the more I study that, I'm like, nah, I think Mark wrote first. And then you can make a really good case that Matthew and Luke added on. So it's quite some people make that, but they don't. Once again, it's an argument. And it's been an argument since the early church fathers. So nobody's been able to do that. So yes, but yes, Barker, Fawcett, and you destroyed Mike Jones' position. Yes. RCRF Barker. Yes. Yeah. Like, well, but this is up here on the screen, Fred, this is his external evidence. Like, that's the problem. Every time he says external evidence, he means something that's 130 years at least after the fact. So that's what Paul's pointing out. Like, what external evidence have you provided besides this chart up here on the screen? Like, what else have you given? And the answer is nothing. Okay. And so Mike Jones keeps appealing to this, but this has problems and big ones. So it's like he keeps doing it and it drives me nuts.
This is just frosting. You should have made a whole 6-hour video about this external evidence, since it's doing all the heavy lifting.
You're attacking a straw man here.
Yes, it is doing all the heavy lifting, and it isn't capable of doing that lifting. Okay. Yeah, like it's, when you look at Matthew and Luke and how they correct Mark, they add to him, there's like added little phrases, or they correct his grammar, or like you can see where Matthew and Luke corrected Mark, but you can't. Mark doesn't really seem to do that with Matthew and Luke. So, but yeah, like it makes more sense. Like you have the basic story of Mark, and then Matthew and Luke add birth narratives and resurrection narratives because Mark doesn't actually have one. And then you have, additions. You can make a case for Matthew and Luke providing additions and corrections to Mark. It's harder to go the other way. Okay. So it's like, it's just really, it's difficult. The easier, more Occam's razor assumption to me, getting rid of all the fluff, is Mark wrote first, and he was one of the sources for both Matthew and Luke. And I think Matthew and Luke had multiple sources, including some of their own unique ones. So that's a better way to look at it to me. But yeah.
If I'm saying this proves eyewitness testimony, I never said that. Okay. So we're moving on to Luke now. And guess what? We are 2/3 of the way through this the series, because this is video 11, I believe. But he didn't really address the main point there. And again, I did say in that video on the Gospel of Matthew, the internal evidence isn't enough to establish traditional authorship.
Agree. That bears repeating.
Yeah, you got to believe that some anonymous nobody had super impressive power over the church to put the titles on, convince everyone, somehow hide all debate about it for posterity reasons. But was too stupid to do that for Hebrews, added stuff into Matthew, but had to figure out through.
Yeah, once again, there is no super editor, no super conspiracy to cover up the truth, and do this. No critic worth anything has ever claimed that.
Through Luke's gospel to figure out, or go through Paul's letters to find out an author for them. I mean, it just
like invents a supervillain to replace my argument. I have never proposed that some single mastermind impose the titles on the entire church. Nor do critical scholars think the names of the Gospels were handed down by a single ruling body like a church council. No institution or person in the early to mid 2nd century had the power to enforce such a decision across the Mediterranean world. What many skeptics do believe is that an influential standardized edition of the 4 Gospels was published in the mid to late 2nd century, likely in Rome or Asia Minor. Since Rome sat at the theological center of Christendom, this collection, titles included, would have spread quickly through Christian communities everywhere. As for how such a volume may have received such names,
how is that just not evidence?
Yeah, that, just so everybody knows, that is the more common theory about how the tradition of the 4 gospel names got going, is that several communities just started putting them together, and there may have been an early canonical form. Once again, we're dealing with theory in the more colloquial sense, or hypothesis. But the best hypothesis seems to be there's an early collection of gospels that started to be known as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and it just became very popular, and the church popularized it, and that's why the church fathers in the 2nd and 3rd century start arguing about it. But there's no evidence of anything before that. It's just, and we really don't have evidence of that volume, but it's a likely hypothesis, I guess. And it has falsifiability, because if you can find something else earlier that does something different than that, but does the same job, then that would falsify it. So it's in the realm of, tested with further information. So, but it kind of fits. So, yeah. All right. Oh, Josh, we got one left. One more. All right. One more. There you go. Call it the Beatles of Jesus and be done with it. Mark is their Ringo. I had to write one thing and then they had to fix it. Yes. But yeah, we're dealing with complete conjecture at this point as to how the tradition arrived at its Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. It's not clear, but the internal evidence for all the Gospels is, they say that, but hey, look at Fred. Look at that. There you go. All right. Let's see. And it is the Holy Bunny hat. So all the proper rituals have been preserved. So here we go. I'm going to call it a day here. I've got enough Okay, 121. We'll pick this up in this chapter on Friday and finish it out. There's definitely some stuff that Paul says at the end that I want to talk about from a deconversion point of view, and that deserves its whole reaction in and of itself. Didn't get quite as far through these chapters as I'd hoped, but yeah, we're going to do that. So I'm going to pull this off, and let's see. We have to have. There's two things that I meant to do to make official dogma of Fangs. So, yellow submarine. Okay. Oh, all right, there we go. We'll end your torture. All right, the first official dogma is that we have discovered that Fangs is also the patron of all dental hygienists. Not everybody in the dental profession. I want to make that abundantly clear, but he has, because of the lap in which he naps, he has decided that he is also the patron of all dental hygienists. So we're going to add that to lists of stage magicians, people who want good, safe, consensual sex, bunnies, and all the rest of them. So there you go. And I am going to add, because I thought about it, Fangs, because of his association with me as the Grand Master of the Fluffle, is now also the patron of all former pastors who have become atheists. So we have two new patronages, two spheres of influence that Fangs has now devoted himself. So there you go. So all dental hygienists and all ex-pastors who are now atheists now fall under the guidance and protection of Fangs. So there you go. That's official dogma. And I'm wearing the hat. The rituals have been observed. So therefore, it is true. It is true. That's how it works in religion, and that's how it works with things. Oh, yes. Blessed be Fangs. He nibbled for our sins with his sharp, pointy teeth. Deliver us from corrupted vessels. May he forever nibble at your heart and grant you everlasting whiskers or wisdom. He hates getting close. There you go. He might. I don't know. Yes, that was funny. Yes. Hail Fangs. There we go. So new dogma there, folks. And I want to thank all the, I'm going to take this opportunity because I'm about to close out anyway, but I want to thank Josh for his many, many donations today. Thank you so much, Josh. Appreciate you. And I want to thank Fred. So there you go. The rest of the story is important. The author is irrelevant. They're Ike. There you go. But yeah, it's like, but that's the other thing, Fred, that I can close out with is because with all this argument over authorship, it doesn't mean that even an eyewitness to an event can't put legendary development in or present something that's not historically true. This is something the apologists seem to want. They're fighting to get into the game of history at all. And that's something that I think somebody like me can point out to them that, yeah, we're just fighting to get into the game of calling the Gospels history, but you can't really do that. They can't even get to the basics of being in the game, of having their author and date settled. And, there's a lot of biographies, histories of ancient antiquity that we question because of these same problems. And they want to get into the game where they're at least a little bit heavier, and they haven't been able to do it yet because they still can't establish the authors, and they still can't establish the date with any kind of firmness. And so, is it history? So there you go. All right. Oh, yeah, it's gone close, although she's still a queen. Yeah, Bloody Bony Bar, yes. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate you too. Yeah. Yeah, it's official Bunma now. So all of it is official Bunma. So yeah, hit that like button. All right. Thanks everybody for stopping by. I'm going to finish this up. I want to finish this up mostly because of what Paul says at the end, talking about, once again, his faith. And, everybody knows I'm big on deconversion and helping people through the process. And part of the process that comes up is these apologists just don't seem to get why we have objections. So there's that. So, but thank you all for being here. We'll finish this up on Friday. On Thursday, I'm going to be doing a little bit different deconversion hangout. It'll still be deconversion hangout, but Earl found me a PBS video, which actually turns out to be a story of how a deconverted person has to get along with another family member that's very important to them. And it's in a young earth creationist context. And I'm like, okay, this is good. So there you go. I can call pizza health food because it's tomatoes healthy, but it's crap. Calling the Bible historically accurate is exactly the same. Yes. Yeah. That's the point. Like, let's say the apologists get all they want. They establish the date of the Gospels as before 70 AD. They establish the authors are indeed Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Does that mean that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John reported things historically accurately? No. It still doesn't mean that. You still have to debate those points. But yeah, so there you go. But yes, I think going through this video, and I'm going to go through it slowly, Mistress, on Thursdays, because I want to digest it myself. I think it's very helpful because this is like a real life situation that was recorded between a daughter and her father, who's a minister / teacher, something, who's a young earth creation, and she now believes in evolution. I'm just kind of setting the stage for this. And there's so much in this video that has nothing to do with young earth creationism, but has everything to do with the relationships that deconverted people have with their still believing family members. Like I actually felt very sad after listening to it, and then I watched it again and I still felt sad. But there's a lot of things to deep dive here, and I think it'll be a great discussion starters as we go through it. I think it's going to be good. So, but yeah, if you want, that's what I do on Thursdays is I help people through this. So if you still have struggles, you're more than welcome to come by and we'll talk it through. I'm no expert. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I'm all about kind of talking through the deconversion issues and helping people get to a better place. So you're more than welcome on Thursdays because that's what I do. So, and I try to make it a very theist-free zone too. So unless they behave themselves really, really well. So, but there you go. Thanks everybody. Once again, thanks to Josh and thanks to Fred for donating. Appreciate all of you, but I do need to get going and get to work. But thank you everybody for being here today. Hope you enjoy this. See you all again. We'll finish this up on Friday. Deconversion hangout. We're heading in a pretty good. It's just this guy, Yes, thanks. But thanks everybody. And so may Fangs nibble on all of your hearts, especially if you're a dental hygienist or an ex-pastor who's now an atheist. As it's now official dogma that he loves those more particularly, just like bunnies. So, but may he draw himself closer to you with his sharp, pointy teeth, and may you purify all of your vegetables of religious corruption, except, of course, the most holy of vegetables, the carrot, which requires none because it's never corrupted. That's official dogma too now, before I forget. If you need a warm fuzzy in your religion, we have the best picture ever to give you warm fuzzies. So enjoy that picture of the godlit Fangs. Look into those deep eyes, and you will get every warm fuzzy you ever need. If you need a religious ritual in your life, we have that too. Circumcise a carrot, put it on top of your stash or anything you found valuable. And, maybe Fangs will take the carrot instead of the stash. Maybe he'll take both. Maybe he'll take none. Like all religious rituals, results vary. It's really just a matter of whatever, because they really don't work. Beware. Also, be aware that Judge Fangs looks for legal loopholes to take your stash, so make sure you check your local laws. And beware the lies and the vibes of the apologists. They're everywhere, particularly those apologists who want to lower the bar of epistemological proof into hell, where the low bar gets so low it's ridiculous. Make sure you beware of those. And the precept opossums are out there. Make sure you avoid those as well. They can be very, very dangerous. So Stay safe, folks. And as always, folks, live your best life. You only get one go around it, then it's over. So make sure you take all your time, money, and opportunities, give them to yourself, the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. Oh, and before I forget, also remember there's a GoFundMe for Earl. Check that out if you can. If you can help, that's great. If you can't, share it with somebody that can. We appreciate all the help. So thank you. Don't waste your life on the trappings of religion and faith. That's a dead end. I speak from experience. As always, folks, thanks for stopping by. I'll catch you all on Thursday for another episode of Deconversion Hangout. And we're actually getting quite high in numbers in Deconversion Hangout. So we'll have to talk about that too. But see y'all. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end to find out how you can support the channel better. Of course, there's always the normal notions of just hitting that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit your notification bell, and share the video with your friends and family that you think would be interested. That's always very appreciated. If you want to support the channel in a more tangible way, there's several options. You can super chat or super thanks in the comments or during a stream. Those are always very welcome. But you also can become a member of the channel. Members have certain perks like getting the videos early, things like that. They also have some good custom emojis during chat. So all of these things are good benefits to members, but they also support this channel and its work to continue to normalize atheism and deconversion, for which I'm very appreciative. It keeps me going, and it keeps me as a content creator being able to do more and more as a content creator. So if you choose those methods of support, thank you very much. And I appreciate you once again for staying to the end and listening to other ways that you can support the channel. Appreciate it. Thanks, and I'll catch you next time.